Hey there, it's another Tuesday, which means it's time for another in real life video. This week, the topic is one that is a viewer submitted topic. It comes from the gentle viewer whose username is on screen right about now. And of course, you can always submit future topics for future in real life videos if you want to. We've already got a pretty decent list, but hey, no harm in adding more to it if it hasn't been added yet, right? Always good to have more. Anyway, in so many words, well, alright, specifically they ask, let's see here. Have you ever thought of doing a playthrough of certain games that would be considered out of the norm compared to what you have done so far? Would you ever consider playing Nintendo games like Zelda, Mario, etc.? Would you ever consider playing role-playing games that you are not used to playing, like Shin Megami Tensei or other JRPGs? Which, in so many words, is basically, what games wouldn't you play, and all of that on the channel for Let's Plays, playthroughs, long plays, whatever jargon you want to use for it. And certainly one of these days, I do want to get organized my little list and maybe make it digital and all of that, my planned future playthrough list, and then we'll show that off every so often, keep people updated, and sort of order it in more likely to appear to less likely to appear, well, still likely to appear, but the time frame, right? Likely to appear soon versus likely to appear much further out. But yeah, games like Shin Megami Tensei, the Persona games, the certain Zelda games like the newer ones, Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, I've definitely 100% thought of playing and have gotten very close to doing, in fact, a Tears of the Kingdom playthrough on the channel. And I think it is something that will happen soon enough. I think it'll happen soon enough, a Tears of the Kingdom playthrough. But to sort of address the broader question here, what are games that I wouldn't do playthroughs of on the channel? Well, very clearly, we have sort of a niche going in role-playing games. So I'm very uninclined to play something that is beyond the purview of being in some way, right? And granted, role-playing game is a fairly horrible genre for this, right? And frankly, I want to make future videos about it, but role-playing game is kind of a difficult genre to nail a lot of things down because there's a lot of ways in which you can define role-playing game, and there's a lot of different ways in which people define role-playing games themselves, right? There's various definitions for what makes a role-playing game, and basically I want to get to the bottom of a lot of it and at least express my own opinions on that in the future. But that's kind of what makes it so difficult. So broadly speaking, it needs to be something that generally folks would say, oh, that's a role-playing game. Or if it isn't strictly a role-playing game, it needs to have some sort of strong narrative, right? Something very narrative-focused. For example, we played Pentiment, which I really enjoyed and played through on the channel not too long, well, I guess about a year ago now at this point. But that was not technically a role-playing game. Granted, it had player agency and choices and stuff, branching dialogue. However, more strictly speaking, it was sort of an adventure game. You know, it was much more akin to a point-and-click. But that is also the sort of game that I would 100% put on the channel. Something narrative-focused in that sense, if it isn't, strictly speaking, some type of role-playing game. Even among role-playing games, I think I'm less inclined to play certain action role-playing games on the channel, right? Sort of like, I'm not sure if I would play, for example, the campaign of Path of Exile on the channel. I'm not sure if I would do that, because, frankly, I have a lot of playtime in Path of Exile, but it's the type of game where I just literally skip nearly every single bit of narrative, because it is very much a game focused on the mechanics and the action parts of role-playing, sort of defining your character's role insofar as combat and the mechanics of that is concerned. So that's probably something that wouldn't appear on the channel. That said, we have also, when it comes to non-role-playing games, we have put some on the channel that are not role-playing games and are not narratively focused. So that would be the Doom playthroughs, right? Which, frankly, the Doom playthroughs were very quick and were games I had already wanted to play, so not too bad, right? In that regard, it wasn't like this took a lot of time that could be devoted to starting something else or whatever. They were really quite quick. Each level was one video, so I think it was like, 13 videos per game. Granted, some of those videos went over time, over my usual time at least. But yeah, all in all, the Doom playthroughs are probably, especially for when I publish them relative to the channel, they're probably some of the poorer performing videos on the channel, and that is for the reason that it is beyond the purview of my niche, right? I've chosen very explicitly to sort of specialize in making videos about role-playing games or narrative-centric video games, right? And even role-playing games of a certain ilk, right? I could see a situation where something that leans into more immersive sim elements could pretty well do well on the channel, because Bethesda games in and of themselves are very close to immersive sims, right? Anything very similar to a Bethesda game, I think, would perform quite well. Obviously, CRPGs are the other big tent pole for the channel, so anything close to a CRPG. But yeah, for stuff like tactical, turn-based team role-playing games, right? Sort of like your Personas, your older Final Fantasy games, stuff like that. What a lot of people refer to as JRPGs and stuff, although, like, it's been in the news a while back. Some folks who make JRPGs would rather not have the distinction, but others embrace it, right? It's kind of there is not a monolith, as it were, as far as that opinion is concerned. So kind of take it case by case, I think, and tread carefully and respectfully, I would say. But regardless of all that, stuff like Persona 5, I have played a fair amount of it in my own time, but I did kind of fall off of it. Sort of the one and done / timed nature of it turned me off of it, because I would just screw up at a certain point in the game. Like I would make a weird choice I wasn't happy with, and you can't really go back, right? You can't really go back on that. And I don't know. I think maybe if I really wanted to commit to it, I'd probably get through it. It's one of the few games I started and haven't seen through, so it really sticks out to me. But that said, other games of that ilk, like Final Fantasy VII is one of the first role-playing games that I've ever completed in my life. In my own time, of course, but it's one of the first video games, I think, that I saw from start to finish myself, that I didn't have any like outside help from a friend or family member, anything like that, picking up the controller to help me in some way. But definitely have an interest in doing that. So sort of getting at games I wouldn't be interested in playing. That would be games that, of course, aren't within the channel's purview, right? Not a role-playing game, not focused in a narrative sense, even if it is a role-playing game. Also, ones with a sort of vibe or aesthetic that I don't really mesh with, which I'm willing to try a whole lot, and we have certainly played games on the channel that have a vibe or an aesthetic that I just really don't care for. But a good example of this would be probably anything very much aimed exclusively at young audiences. Like, for example, isn't Costume Quest? I don't know if you're familiar with Costume Quest. It's made by Double Fine. But it's this really cutesy, like, Halloween-y fun game. And I believe it has sort of a similar role-playing game combat mechanic as sort of Final Fantasy, older and and Persona. I believe it has that sort of turn-based tactics with a squad. But it's aimed at such a young audience. I'm not sure if I would enjoy it on my own. It's the kind of game where, like, if I were hanging out with family or something like that, maybe I'd be into it. Really anything aimed at, like, younger audiences in that same way, that I wouldn't find it as compelling in that way. And, like, I hate to say it because I used to love it so much. Probably most contemporary core Pokemon games I would bounce off of. I know, even among folks my age and older, it is still very much in vogue and popular to play Pokemon games, although they're certainly aimed at, like, younger audiences, make no mistake of it. It's still totally fine and acceptable to play a Pokemon game, right? But I don't know, I just find myself really bouncing off of them. There's all these weird challenges too, like the Nuzlocke challenge or whatever it's called. But I cannot get into it. I find it too... It's a little too surface level after having played so many hours of Pokemon as a kid growing up. I just cannot bring myself to get back into it. So I would correlate it to sort of my struggle with getting back into, like, hotkey MMOs, because I played so many growing up. I played so much World of Warcraft, so much Anarchy Online growing up, that I do have difficulty getting into it, right? Even Elder Scrolls Online, which isn't quite hotkey MMO, like it's hotkey MMO light, I would say. Even that I have difficulty getting into because of the interaction on, like, a gameplay level. It just evokes all of that stuff that I'm just kind of staled on. You know, I've kind of gotten past it, which isn't to say, like, there wouldn't ever be one that, of either of those examples, that would be like, oh my gosh, this one completely reinvents it. It reinvigorates the sort of subgenre, as it were. Sure, I'd absolutely give it a shot, right? But just broadly speaking, those sorts of games, either of those two, which I've just kind of, I've played so much of them, I'm effectively, like, burned out on them, but not so much in the sense that I wouldn't try one that invigorates it, like I said. And anything aimed at particularly younger audiences, I probably wouldn't get into, because the way in which I would approach it then, especially if I were doing a playthrough, like if it were aimed at younger audiences, I would want to try to glom onto and talk about, as I do in a lot of the videos, right? If you watch a lot of the regular videos, I talk about the narrative and we try to interact with it on a different level and all of that, and sort of examine and think about and as best we can and sort of appreciate what is and isn't there. I fear that in doing that with a game that is aimed at younger audiences, like, the only way in which I could potentially interact with it is by being almost unnecessarily cruel to it, which is maybe coming off strong, but I fear that I would be mocking it more than one should, right? I feel like I would be just laughing at, like, this is for kids or whatever, right? And that's funny for, like, a one-off gag, but I feel like I don't know if it could sustain a playthrough, and or at the very least, if it could sustain me for a playthrough, like if I would enjoy doing that, because that would be effectively all that I would glom onto. Right, and make no mistake as well, there are things that are aimed at kids, but are also, more broadly speaking, they're for everyone, not just for kids. They're, like, you know, there's games that are E for everyone, and they are for everyone, but there's games that are E for everyone, and it's for, like, a young audience, right? I can't help but think back to, I played Undertale for myself a while back, and I very much enjoyed that, and Undertale absolutely has a very young, skewed audience, but sure enough, there's plenty of older folks as well. middle-aged and older who do enjoy it and see it for its merits. And it does have merits, right? And it does have a lot of fun stuff that you can get into and sort of think about, right, in that way. And I think that is part of why. Although it's certainly, I would say, maybe overplayed, overstayed its welcome. No, that's probably too harsh. It's just in the zeitgeist a lot, though that's fading. But yeah, it skews publicly toward younger audiences, but I think other folks can enjoy it too, right? Beyond that. And for the most part, that's where I'm at. Try and keep it in that genre, under that umbrella for the channel. I would play things unlike that off camera, or maybe even like on a stream, I feel like would be a good idea. But that's a topic for another video, possible stream games and whatnot. But yeah, that's sort of the throughput of it. There's very few games I would say that would turn my nose up to in that regard. But there are definitely ones that also I would give favoritism to, because I know for a fact it's very similar to games that we have already played on the channel. Right? There's no ignoring that, like, oh, if it's similar to a Bethesda game, which there are currently very few of, but hey, there may very well, it sounds like, be more of them in the future. Or a CRPG. I know that would probably be something that I both enjoy and would probably do decently well on the channel, either in the short term or the long term, right? Typically in the cases of CRPGs that we play on the channel, they do not do terribly well up front, right? Like they have normalish, middling-ish sort of viewership from the get-go, but a lot of folks will watch them over a longer period of time. They have very long tails. They have very long lifespans. In the case of Baldur's Gate 1, thanks to Baldur's Gate 3 as well, coming out, that playthrough that we did originally has accrued a fairly good amount of viewership, I would say, for being as old as it is, right? And same goes for, shockingly enough to me, the old Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 playthroughs. As much as I enjoyed them, those were some of the first playthroughs I ever did on the channel. And certainly I don't think I was that good at, I don't know, talking over games, finding the fun in games, commentating over it. And my hardware was definitely not up to snuff. I remember even in Deadfire, we ran into issues with load screens taking forever. My microphone was not nearly as good. I didn't even know how to edit audio to sort of overcome that shortcoming as good. But nonetheless, those people, there are still a scant few amount of people watching through those, right? So like I said, with the Doom playthrough, that's probably the least popular things that we've done on the channel, right? So it should be something under either of those two tentpoles, or from similar developers that folks like and stuff, just to see sort of that lineage. You know, it sort of makes sense as you think about it, right? But stuff like Shin Megami Tensei, I'd totally be down for. Persona, I'd be down for. Final Fantasy, even the older ones, 100% be down for. And a lot of these are on the list. A lot of these are in some way on my long-term list, right? All right. Hopefully that is an answer that suffices. Until next time, please take care of each other.